you probably want maybe when you get a pen. That's better.
Oh, you got a pen underneath.
Oh, yeah.
Relegated you just work.
Is this Dartmouth?
What's that? The packet is Dartmouth.
Chinese lit? Who's ready? Who's ready?
Impossible biology, who's ready? Not me.
Toss of one. This figure asked his parents if they accepted the crimes he committed on their behalf, to which they replied that he was responsible for them as well as his own sins. This figure's veneration is the focus of a Punjab-centered Dalit-based sect that identifies the Yoga Vasistha as one of its scriptures. While stopping near a stream, this figure was distraught when the male of a pair of mating cranes was killed by an arrow.
It is Valmiki.
Nice.
In the isolated state, this thinker argued that vocational rent decreases with increased distance to markets. Named this economic geographer who posited a model in which 4 rings of agriculture surround a city. A different type of agriculture would be practiced in each ring due to the cost needed to transport goods.
Okay, so hoteling has a location-based like pricing model, so it might be that.
Or Crystaller?
I think Crystaller.
Crystaller?
Thunen.
Oh, fuck, is the other one, yeah.
The outermost of Von Thunen rings is dominated by this agricultural industry. The overgrazing caused by this industry is the subject of a William Lloyd pamphlet, which in turn inspired Garrett Hardin's paper, The Tragedy of the Commons.
Cattle ring.
Ranching or something? Just say like farming.
No. I think
Okay, cattle then?
Cattle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This other theory of economic geography was developed in Dynamics of Global Crisis and proposes that the richer core countries exploit the outer periphery.
World systems theory.
Yeah.
World systems theory.
Yeah, 20.
Sorry, I should have gotten volunteer.
One astronomical mission designed to explicitly study this regime, ROSAT, suggested that Jaminga was responsible for the gas in the local cavity's activity in this regime. In 2003, a satellite provided strong evidence that magnetars are anomalously slow rotation pulsars, which are optically active in this regime. Paraboloid and hyperboloid surfaces coated with gold and iridium are used to account for the grazing incidents when studying this regime. A satellite that provides images of this regime produced the first image of the supernova remnant Cassiopeia A, and the first discovered binary that is luminous in this region of the spectrum.
X-ray?
This politician was dubbed the Lion of Whitehall in reference to his family home in Kentucky, where he founded the abolitionist newspaper True American in Lexington in 1845. Named as Kentucky Planter, who was named Minister to Russia by Abraham Lincoln at the very start of the Civil War, in which role he drummed up Russian support for the Union.
Cassius Clay.
Or is it Bernie? Oh, you say what you think it is.
Clay?
Yeah. Upon his recall, Clay was replaced as Minister to Russia by this politician from Pennsylvania, who'd been serving as Lincoln's first Secretary of War before being replaced by his assistant Edwin Stanton. This man's son, James, was also a war secretary for Ulysses Grant.
Cameron.
Yeah, Cassius Clay always carried one of these weapons with him, which he used to kill Cyrus Turner. This blade was infamously used at the Vidalia sandbar fight by its namesake, a frontiersman who died at the Battle of the Alamo.
Bowie knife.
Oh, yeah.
Bowie knife. Yeah.
Nice.
Work on Cassius Clay. One of this dynasty's rulers built a monastery after claiming divine favor for killing 38 heretics when he saw a heavenly light usually identified as Halley's Comet. That ruler's wife sent Matthew the Armenian as an envoy to Manuel I of Portugal. Male heirs of this dynasty were confined in a mountain prison until they succeeded to the throne or died, as described by the ambassador Francisco Alvarez. According to legend, this dynasty was founded by a man who ate the head of a rooster after it was discarded by a royal cook. In a book describing this dynasty's origins, a woman is given a ring to allow her son to identify himself to the king of Jerusalem. The elder Gondarine branch of this dynasty traced descent from its first ruler, Yakuno Amlak, and its symbol was a lion carrying...
Solomonic.
Okay.
I should have looked on ring as
Yeah.
Yeah.
If literature is any guide, the Canadian immigrant experience is pretty bleak. A detective of this ethnicity stars in Rick Shiomi's noir-inspired play Yellow Fever. Naomi reads her Aunt Emily's journals recounting the trauma of Canadian internment of people of this ethnicity in Joy Kagawa's Obasan.
That makes sense.
Japanese.
Yeah, the half-Tamil, half-Sinhalese man Shivan abandons his partner Michael in Vancouver to take care of his rent-controlling grandmother back in Sri Lanka in The Hungry Ghosts, a novel by this Sri Lankan-Canadian author of Funny Boy.
It's not on document.
It's not in Dutch.
Okay. It's the other. Andachi 2.
Shyam Salvadorai. A depressed immigrant from this country moves to rural Alberta with his arsonist twin daughters in The Second Life of Samuel Tyne, our sister Killjoy author Ama Ata Aidu, and The Beautiful Ones Are Not Yet Born author Ayi Kwe Arma are both from this African country.
Ghana.
This character has a talent for seeing the essence of every situation, according to an essay that challenges J. Dover Wilson's very dull and very shallow interpretation. This character is so negative and insignificant that she arouses disgust that envelops and exceeds her, according to a Carolyn Heilbrunn essay. After being accused of honeying and making love over the nasty sty with a cut purse of the empire and the rule, this character begs, "Oh, speak to me no more, these words like daggers." No.
Shit.
Enter into mine ears. She pronounces a man to be as mad as the sea and wind for crying, a rat, and urges another character to speak to me no more during the closet scene. An eavesdropper is stabbed behind a tapestry in the closet of this character, who's denounced with the phrase, "Frailty, thy name is woman." For 10 points, name this character whom Freud cast as the object of Hamlet's Oedipal desire.
Gertrude.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay,
okay.
Yeah, his mother.
No.
Industrial production of MSG relies on the glutamicum species of this bacteria, which clusters in characteristic Chinese letters. In this genus of gram-positive catalase-positive rod-shaped bacterium, whose major pathogenic species is distinguished by its clubbed ends and ability to reduce nitrate, this bacteria's minutissimum species fluoresces coral red under a woods lamp.
Jesus Christ.
What do you got?
Clostridium?
Corinabacterium. Fermentation of soy to produce miso and MSG-filled soy sauce is done using the Oryzae species of this genus of fungi. The Parasiticus and Flavus species of this genus produce aflatoxins.
Aspergillus.
Yeah, a type of edible seaweed called nori is produced from organisms in this eukaryotic phylum, whose namesake color comes from the pigment phycoerythrin.
So, is that red algae, I think? Red algae?
Yeah. Profit. 5. Thomas Crowe's Emulation discusses why the weeping woman on the far right of this artwork is modeled on the description of Timanthes' painting of Iphigenia. 8 Doric columns, partially covered by a white cloth, form a right angle in this painting's center background. On this painting's far right is a nurse who covers her face with a blue shawl. Many critics divide the dark masculine left-hand side of the painting with the light feminine right-hand side. The inscription Dea Roma appears below the statue of a goddess at the left of this painting's title figure, who sits on a klysmos and holds a decree ordering an execution for attempting to restore the Tarquinian monarchy. Exhibited the week after the storming of the Bastille, this is, for 10 points, what Jacques Louis...
Victors bring to Brutus the bodies of his sons.
Yes.
Paul Churchland promoted this position in his book Neurophilosophy, identified this position which asserts the common sense folk psychology does not provide an adequate understanding of the mind, and that concepts like feeling and belief lack biological basis.
No, it's not. It says
Many.
Eliminative materialism. Contra Paul Churchland, this philosopher argued that folk psychology is valid because it's accurate in helping predict human behavior. That argument, and ones about propositional attitudes, appear in his book, Psychosemantics.
it's a guy who wrote the second. Name of the philosopher of mind.
What do you got?
Gripping.
Jerry Fodor. In the language of thought, Fodor argued that the original sin of the Wittgensteinian tradition was confusing mentalism and this Cartesian position, which argues that the mind and body are not of the same substance. Yeah, you Nothing. Before major events, members of this culture would lubricate a lid with fruit juice and tree bark and then attempt to stick it to a rubbing board. This culture believed that the liver was a source of supernatural power and that it was transmitted in a patrilineal manner, except in cases of royalty. A monograph on this culture distinguishes between scientific notions, common sense notions, and mystical notions. Contra Lucien Levy-Bruhl, that text argues that this culture's adoption of mystical notions is not necessarily irrational. That book on this culture also uses the example of termites destroying a granary floor to explain this culture's adoption of superstition. Members of this culture engaged in bengay, a procedure in which a chicken was poisoned to answer a question about the future. For 10 points, name these peoples whose use of witchcraft...
Azande.
Yeah.
Sitting on.
Yeah, it was just.
This man's reputation as a music critic declined after he criticized jazz in books like Perennial Fashion Jazz, which fellow Marxist Eric Hobsbawm called some of the stupidest pages ever written about jazz. Identified this critical theorist and student of Alban Berg, who contrasted the music of Igor Stravinsky and the Schoenberg-led Second Viennese School in philosophy of modern music.
So like Adorno. I mean,
I don't know who this is. It's a Marxist, though.
he's a Marxist when he talks about music. I don't know. Adorno?
Yeah. Like Berg, Adorno was thoroughly enamored with this technique developed by Schoenberg, which seeks to use all of the notes of the scale with equal frequency to avoid emphasizing any single one.
Serialism.
That's right. That's the 12th tone. It's called serialism.
I'm going to accept it for now. This other composer developed his own 12-tone technique and used it in place of in his piece Nomos, considered the first 12-tone composition. He based many compositions, such as his Zwölftonspiel, or 12-tone games, on 44 musical tropes, or tone constellations, that he identified in 1921.
Just Messiaen or Webern.
It has to be a German person, and it's not. Webern's like later, so don't know what to say.
But yeah.
Webern.
Joseph Hauer. You want to put a note there? I mean, I don't have prompt on serialism, but...
So what are you giving him for now?
I'll give him 30 for now.
Wait,
Like,
20.
You're going to do that for now? Okay.
Well, like we didn't.
We didn't
get
get
the
the
last
last
part.
part.
Oh, yeah, give him
Yeah,
20
yeah.
for now, and it could be 10. Yeah, you're right.
Okay.
Toss up 7. In peptide bonds, one of these phenomena produces a well-characterized signal designated NV1. The intensity of these phenomena can be increased by DP mixing or vibronic coupling. CT complexes can undergo LMCT or MLCT examples of these phenomena. In two types of diagrams depicting these phenomena, lines become curved due to the non-crossing rule. In one set of diagrams depicting the energies of these phenomena, both axes are normalized by the Ricard.
So like electronic transitions.
Nice. Good job, dude. Just get all the questions. Easy mode.
As the ever-energetic Philip II of Spain, you're desperately trying to manage the finances of your vast empire. So you introduce the Cruzada tax to fund ventures like this 1571 battle, a naval defeat for the Ottoman Empire with the assistance of Andrea Doria and the Holy League.
Lepanto.
Yeah, you also introduce the excusado tax, so that part of the diezmo gets redirected to your royal coffers. The diezmo was the Spanish term for this obligation, which was abolished by Isabella II.
Service.
What?
Like
No.
service.
What do you got?
Tie.
Yeah. Since you're so busy, you failed to deal with discrimination against Aragonese traders in this Castilian town known for its major wool fairs. Spain negotiated a reduced tariff with England and the marriage of Arthur Tudor to Catherine of Aragon in a 1489 treaty for this town, named for this town.
1489 treaty.
Castilian town. What do you got?
Castilian town.
Valencia, something like that.
Okay. Valencia.
I don't know why this treaty never comes up. It's Medina del Campo.
That does come up.
That does come up, yeah.
20 points. An organization advocating this reform was founded by Pittsburgh Courier editor Robert L. Van in 1939. This reform would have been impeded by proposed amendments to the Elston Act introduced by Richard B. Russell. Kenneth Claiborne Royal was forced to resign from his cabinet post because he wouldn't enforce this reform, which a Clark Clifford memorandum presented as a key aspect of campaign strategy. This reform eliminated the unique status of the Montford Point, which had been created as a result of Executive Order 8802. Walter Francis White wrote a draft of the text that implemented this reform, Executive Order 90.
Ending segregation in the American military.
Yeah. Okay.
Good job, dude.
This character tells a story about a philosopher who's forced to walk a quadrillion kilometers in the dark after expressing disbelief in the future life after his own death. Identify this character who claims that he was predestined to deny and tells inane stories, including one about a man losing his nose to a disease in a hallucination experienced by Ivan near the end of the Brothers Karamazov.
Who would do that? Maybe like Zosima? I don't know.
Yeah, go for it.
Zosima.
The devil, Satan.
Okay.
Ivan is particularly disgusted by the devil's banality, suggesting that the latter embodies this complicated Russian concept that partly translates roughly as petty evil or self-satisfied inferiority. Fyodor Sologub's The Petty Demon is a well-known treatment of this subject.
Huh.
But yeah,
No idea.
Poshlust. Perhaps the most famous early leader of the literary war on Poshlust was this Ukrainian-born Russian author of Dead Souls. After turning down the lead in the stage adaptation of this novel, a character in a different story knocks over a candle at an Italian restaurant because he's angry about being thrown out of his Jewish friend Jules' apartment. That story was written by an author who claimed that this novel creates a climate of anarchy and an unmotivated and unapprehended disaster, noting that the overwhelming limitation of the fearful image it attempts to redeem in social terms. The novel within a novel, Fuck, from Percival Everett's Erasure, parodies both Sapphire's Push and this novel. The protagonist of this novel has accepted a theology that denies him life, according to an essay that traces its lineage from Uncle Tom's Cabin. This novel was criticized in Many Thousands Gone and Everybody's Protest Novel.
Native son.
Yeah. Good job.
This operation between f of t and g of t equals the integral form minus infinity to plus infinity of f of tau times g of t minus tau with respect to d tau. Name this operation represented by a star between two functions such as f star g. Yeah, this operation is equivalent to the convolution of a function with its conjugated time-reversed self. The Wiener-Khinchin theorem states that the power spectrum of a wide-sense stationary phase is equal to the Fourier transform of this operation on the process.
Autocorrelation.
Oh, yeah.
Autocorrelation.
Yeah, the output of linear time-invariant systems is defined as the convolution of the input and impulse response. LT1 systems possess this important property when the impulse response is 0 for all t less than 0.
LT was this.
What's time invariant?
Whatever it says.
Time invariant?
Causality. 20 points. Toss of 10. An illuminated manuscript of a text originally by this writer was produced in 1467 by the monk Danis Nikolaus Gominis and is now held in Poland's Zamoyski Library. The Harleian Collection's minuscule 3686 is a recreation of a work by this man, which had its first modern Latin translation produced in 1406 by Jacobus Angelus, based on a copy obtained by Manuel Chrysoloras. The Vietnamese site Oc Eo is sometimes identified with the location Katagara, mentioned by this man, who created a 5-book work consisting of a series of justifications and corrections for data on longitudes and latitudes. Earlier work by Marinus of Tyre provided the basis for the oikumene described by this man, which ran from the Canary Islands to the middle of China. For 10 points, name this author of the Tetrabiblos, as well as the Cosmographia or Geography, a Greco-Egyptian figure who also wrote about astronomy in his Almagest.
Totally.
Good work.
The surah of this number is named for the prophet Yusuf or Joseph, which is convenient because Joseph had this many brothers, all jealous of his pimp multicolored coat. Name this number, also the number of imams venerated by the largest branch of Shia is contrasted with 7ers.
12.
Yeah, this branch of 12ers draws their teachings from Muhammad ibn Nusayr al-Namiri and was established circa 950 CE by the Hamdanid dynasty. This Shiite sect has now become dominant in Syria, especially in the Lataka region, and was practiced by Hafez al-Assad.
Hafez al-Assad, Ismaili?
It's Alawites.
But Alawites are an ethnic group.
Say that.
Alawites?
Yeah.
Oh.
According to Twelvers, this period began when the hidden imam refused to appoint any further deputies after al-Samari and is still going on to this day.
It's a
The
major
the
occultation.
occultation.
You said major, right? So just say occultation.
Oh, it's occultation.
Wow.
It's a major.
Major.
occultation.
Yeah.
Okay.
Didn't Joseph have 11 brothers?
Score.
Okay, so at the half, I have a score of 250 to 45.
That's what I have.
Okay.
260.
Okay, that's
Toss of 11, an increase in this quantity can improve the mobility of graphene devices to clean them through annealing. Free layers are aligned in a stationary state along their hard axis by the clocking value of this quantity, whose switching magnitude causes the NOT gate of a free layer to reverse from 0 to 1 in a magnetic tunnel junction. Spin transfer torque is generated by the polarization of this quantity. This quantity is amplified via secondary emission in a photomultiplier tube. The sensitivity of a photodiode can be improved by minimizing the dark form of this
Current. That has a dark.
It opens with a depiction of the death of Adam and culminates in a large fresco showing Heraclius fighting Khosrau. Name this cycle found in the Basilica of San Francesco in Arezzo, which shows the making, use, loss, and recovery of the titled religious relic.
Legend of the True Cross.
Yeah, this fresco from the Legend of the True Cross depicts 4 men, 3 of whom are soldiers guarding the title figure in his red-coned yellow tent.
Right.
This painting is impressive for its depiction of a backlit angel descending from the upper left.
Constantine's Dream.
Yeah. The Legend of the True Cross is the masterpiece of this 15th century Italian painter.
Hero della Francesca.
In one work, this philosopher suggests that Adam's association with the demon and poet Abaddon is responsible for the origin of clothing. He argued against Christian Dam's proposed orthographic reforms in New Apology to the Letter H. He invoked a muse with a winnowing fan in a rhapsody in Kabbalistic pose that defends the Orientalism of the Bible. Another of his works, which is partly titled For the Order Used to Kill Jesus, accuses Moses Mendelssohn of using the serpent's deception of language to distinguish eternal and historical truths. In pieces collected in Crusades of the Philologist, such as Aesthetica in Nous, this philosopher ridiculed his protege for writing a treatise on the origin of the languages. For tempoids, name this author of Golgotha and Sheblamini, and teacher of Johann Gottfried Herder, who Isaiah Berlin argues was the most reactionary member of the Counter-Enlightenment.
Maestro?
No.
He's in that book.
Yeah,
so
there's 3 of them.
Come on.
Yeah.
Next.
that was the other one.
Members of this faction were forced out of the Justicialist Party in 1974. Identify this faction of left-wing supporters of Juan Perón, whose members kidnapped and murdered the general Pedro Eugenio Aramburu and the right-leaning Jose Ignacio Urruti.
It's not this concept.
Whatever. Say it.
This concept.
Montoneros. Minister of Social Welfare Jose Lopez Rega, sometimes called El Brujo or the Sorcerer, organized the right-wing Peronist snipers who shot several Montoneros during this 1973 massacre. After this event, the Montoneros and the FAR went underground to wage guerrilla warfare against the Peronists.
Yeah.
Is Asa?
Yeah. The Aziza massacre led to the formation of the AAA, or Argentine Anti-Communist Alliance, and kicked off this period of terrorism in Argentina, also known as the process of national reorganization. It witnessed events like the Night of the Pencils. Yeah, like that. Toss-up. One poem in this language asks, what will remain after us? Will it be lovers weeping in a small dirty hotel when wallpaper dawns, and unfavorably compares generals of the most recent wars to Thucydides after the Battle of Amphipolis? The dying speaker of a poem in this language wishes that this sad heart of mine in leaves of aloe burn, and give it then to her who's given it to me, while imagining his friends drinking at his funeral. Those who expected thunder and lightning are disappointed by the end of the world in a poem in this language, which was used to write several poems that personify humanity as Mr. Cogito. The author of the collections 3 Winters and Facing the River used this language to write a book that discusses Ketman and profiles alpha, beta, gamma.
So, Polish?
The simplest molecule of this type was a popular artificial butter flavoring until it was implicated as a cause of obliterative bronchiolitis dubbed popcorn lung. Name these molecules whose tautomerization is strongly favored by the repulsion between 2 adjacent dipoles. Oxidation of vicinal diols usually results in a cleavage instead of these molecules, which undergo the benzylic acid rearrangement.
Wow.
What you got?
Epoxide.
Diketones. Alpha diketones can be synthesized by reacting alkynes with iodine-containing analogs of this radical initiator. This reagent provides small concentrations of bromine for halohydrin formation and allylic bromination.
So, I think AIBN already came up. So, NBS.
Yep. According to the Goldfinger mechanism, NBS does not generate radicals directly, but first forms elemental bromine. Elemental bromine has this feature, as do hydrogen, oxygen, and all the other elements in the acronym HONCLBRIF.
It's diatomic.
20. Toss-up. Paintings of the Nativity traditionally include an ox and an ass because of this book's line, the ox knoweth the owner, and the ass his master's crib. The hymn Beulah Land comes from this book's declaration that Israel's name will one day be changed to Hephzibah and Beulah. Its 40th chapter describes how every valley shall be exalted, and every mountain and hill shall be made low. in the process of building a straight highway to God. This book is the source of the idea that Israel should be a light unto the nations, and its 53rd chapter inspired the depiction of Christ as the man of sorrows. Its narrator begins to prophesy after an angel.
Is it?
Yeah, I
It's
think
got a
that.
lot of chapters.
And so the following about antebellum American theater. Royal Tyler's The Contrast was one of the first plays to introduce a stock character of this name, representing the stereotypical New England Yankee. A phrase attributed to George Washington says, "We must consult this figure." A brother Jonathan. The Louisiana plantation of Terrebonne was the setting for this Irish-American playwright's extremely popular melodrama, The Octoroon. His other popular plays include the Charon and the Colleen Bawn. Dion Boucicault. Boucicault's The Octoroon was second in popularity among pre-war melodramas to stage adaptations of this novel by Harriet Beecher Stowe, many of which were just thinly veiled blackface minstrel shows.
Yep. Uncle Tom's Got the Temper.
After a defeat, the leader of an uprising against this ruler supposedly watched a city burn from the Marie forest under his namesake oak tree. That leader was beheaded and cut into 4 pieces to be displayed on wheels before the pieces were burned. This non-French ruler set up 2 banks for paper currency, including one designed by Giacomo Quarenghi, located at the old Sea Market building. At each bank created 500,000 notes of assignation currency to replace the glut of impractical copper money. 100 wives and daughters of the Greek infantry battalion were enlisted to receive this ruler as the Amazon Company during a tour of the Tauric provinces. This ruler's threat to intervene forced the Treaty of Teschen in the War of Bavarian Succession. For 10 points, identify this ruler for whom fake settlement...
Yes. She did too.
Neo-pagans frequently regard carvings at Uffington as symbols of this goddess, identified as Gallo-Roman fertility goddess, the only deity of Celtic origin to be given a feast day by the Romans, which is held on December 18th. Her cult was especially popular among soldiers stationed on the Danubian frontier.
You got anything? No. Make it. Go.
Frigid.
Epona. To highlight her role in fecundity, Epona was depicted carrying this object, a source of abundant nourishment. In Greek mythology, this object was broken off of either the goat Amalthea or the river god Achelous. Yeah, unlike his Greek counterpart, this Roman god was depicted carrying the cornucopia instead of a drinking horn. A namesake gate in Hierapolis was dedicated to this god, whose worship replaced that of the earlier Dispater.
Is this like Liber or like
Say, Lieber.
Liber?
Pluto.
Oh, forget it.
Is that 20?
16. Robert Schumann argued that this symphony had an ordered pattern despite its apparent formlessness, and presented a diagram contrasting this symphony with the traditional model in his longest critical essay. This composition repeatedly quotes from the first movement of its composer's earlier cantata, Herminie, while it's...
So we kind of see.
Yeah. The Battle of Rhaphia during these wars was a crushing defeat near Gaza for Antiochus III at the hands of Ptolemy IV, named a series of 6 conflicts between the Ptolemaic and Seleucid kingdoms, which were fought between 274 BC and 168 BC.
These are the Syrian war?
Yeah, it's not the bad.
It's
Alright,
not the
go with the Wars of the Diadochi first.
No.
Because these
Okay,
are-
so the Syrian wars from the Wars of the Diadochi.
You're fine. You're,
Okay.
you're right.
Yeah.
The Battle of Kos during the Syrian wars may have been commemorated by this headless statue at the Louvre, which depicts the goddess Nike.
Wing victory.
Yeah, the Syrian wars marked the first use of this type of armored heavy cavalry by a Hellenic power, which is named for a Greek term meaning fully enclosed. Its origins can be traced to the time of Tiglath-Pileser III, and it was used as the heavy armor component of the Aspharon units in Sassanid Persia.
Counterfacts?
Yeah. So,
Yep.
awesome.
Yeah, right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
In one human microbiome, the onset of this process is characterized by high levels of leucon stock that are gradually replaced by villanella in later stages. The tumorcidal albumin-derived protein complex Hamlet promotes apoptosis during the involution that follows the cessation of this process. Cap cells and TEDs can differentiate into a group of cells which produce contractile force during this process called myoepithelial cells. This process...
Like Wound healing.
Not what I have.
Okay.
This process canonically involves 1 paracellular and 4 transcellular pathways in alveolar cells. Bile salt-stimulated lipase is produced during this process, which initially generates a substance rich in transferrin and secretory IgA to provide passive immunity. This process occurs after parturition in an estrous cycle, and it causes the release of colostrum within the first few days. Micellar casein granules are synthesized during this process, which is stimulated via the letdown reflex by oxytocin and prolactin. For 10 points, name this process by which mothers produce nutrition for newborns. Yeah. This quantity is plotted on the y-axis of a Bragg curve. Name this quantity which reaches a minimum when the product of relativistic beta and the Lorentz factor equals 3 in the Bethe-Bloch formula.
Block. I don't know. Power.
Energy loss of a charged particle. The energy loss of a charged particle traveling through a medium occurs due to the charged particle inducing this phenomenon in the medium. This phenomenon is the inverse of recombination, and the degree to which this process occurs in a plasma is given by the Saha equation.
Yep.
Yeah, in this other method by which charged particles lose energy, the particle decelerates due to electrical interaction with another charged particle, typically producing X-rays in this process.
Is it a check?
No, front wheel.
Toss-up. This leader, whose propaganda styled him as first peasant and first worker, strangely promoted the teaching of folk and Highland dialects in elementary schools. This non-German leader's government used a golden double axe as the symbol of its official youth group and proclaimed the advent of the third version of his country's civilization. Unusually, his regime was tolerant of Jews, though they were banned from participating in its national youth organization, the EON. An October 28th holiday celebrates a rebuke by this man in which he supposedly said "okay" or "no" to an order to station troops in his country. His namesake defensive line...
Taxes.
Yeah, that makes sense.
We knew that later.
Oh, it's a tax.
This experiment, first conducted with Ebbe Everson in 1970, found that very young children who were able to delay immediate gratification for larger future rewards tended to fare better over the course of their lives. In this experiment, repeatedly conducted by Walter Mischel, who instructed children that they'd receive double the namesake reward if they were able to wait 15 minutes.
The Stanford marshmallow test.
Yeah, the notion of personality shaped through social learning and realizations of reward and punishment in situations is often traced to this behaviorist author of Walden II.
Skinner.
Yeah. The first major theory of social learning, developed by this man in his 1954 book, Social Learning in Clinical Psychology, claims that behavior is determined by 2 types of expectancy, expected outcome, and the value placed on that outcome, which is part of his concept of locus of control.
Just, locus of control. It's not Bandura, it's the other guy who always in Bandura toss-ups. Ross?
Rotter. Julian
Rotter,
Rotter.
damn it.
In a story, a man who smuggled merchandise from this city is shot by his son-in-law, who's killed by bandits as he tries to rape his mistress, the mistress his father-in-law picked up in one of this city's department stores. A character plans to return to this city after he's unable to eat a can of Spam while sitting next to the corpse of a pilot. After killing a man in this city, a character describes feeling pride at not being a woman to a drug-addicted retired sociology professor in a novel whose sections are prefaced by times like 11:30 at night. A boy watching the bombing of the HMS Petterell while in this city, near which that boy helps distribute food with Mr. Maxted and is cared for by Dr. Ransom. The American soldiers Frank and Basie are marched to a camp with Jim after he is separated from his parents in this city, where Chen assassinates Tang Yen Ta.
Big eye.
Good job.
What's that from?
That's right.
Yeah.
Answer some questions about controversies involving opera composers. A simulcast of this composer to the death of Klinghoffer was recently canceled among mass protests at the Metropolitan, as other operas include Nixon in China and Dr. Atomic. The San Francisco Opera premiered this composer's Dolores Claiborne, which contains a scene where the title character is molested on stage. In 2005, he composed an opera based on an American tragedy.
Williams.
Tobias Picker. As riots broke out when his oratorio The Raft of the Medusa premiered, this composer led a chant of Ho 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 Chi Minh. His other works include the one-act opera The Bassarids.
John Williams.
I tried to give that away when I answered the last one. It's Hans Henze.
Didn't try hard enough.
Oh well.
Thanks, Richard.
Wah, wah.
10 points.
Good effort.
Last toss-up. This place was characterized as a vicious cabal of warring factions by the author of God with Revolver. In an unreleased film set here, Rene Ricard gives orchids to a bulimic socialite as they both imitate an Obertrol addict. Another film of this cold, frightening, forbidding place is dominated by De Viren bookwalters changing facial expressions. A sex club called The Toilet inspired ghost pissers like Victor Hugo to come here and urinate to produce oxidation paintings. An assassination attempt at this place was perpetrated by an author who believed that all males should be exterminated in the Scum Manifesto. Paul America, Ultraviolet, and Edie Sedgwick worked at this place and were three of its owners' superstars. The film...
Okay, so Warhol's place was called The Factory?
Yeah.
Yeah, fuck. Took forever. Oh my god.
I've seen the oxidation.
Yeah, that's famous.
This author's poem, Betrayal, describes one with a foolish, lovely face who stands with scattered, moonstruck air before revealing that she is beauty killed by unpitying time. Name this author from the Orkney Islands, who contributed Prometheus to Faber's Ariel poems series. This author essentially introduced Kafka to the Anglophone world by translating his major works with his wife, Willa.
Just Max Brod. I don't know. It's not that. That's like,
What do you got?
some kind of Brod.
Edwin Muir. The speaker of one of Edwin Muir's poems stands with one foot in this place. Our lingering parents took their solitary way after being led out of this place through the Eastern Gate at the end of a 17th century poem.
Let out of this place. Our Eastern parents let out of this place, like Jerusalem, I don't know.
Okay.
Jerusalem.
Garden of Eden. The
Damn it.
speaker claims, I am no trichomaniac and no foot fetishist. In the quiet glades of Eden, one of the many love poems written by this author, he traced the influence of Celtic myth and poetry in The White Goddess.
It's Robert Graves.
Brave, yeah.
Okay, the final score is 405 for Penn, 165 for MIT.
Slap.